I got married on the day my sister lost everything. She tried to steal my wedding but got the most public exposure of her life. My name is Emily, I'm 28, and 3 days ago I married Jason, the man I've loved for the last 5 years, my partner, my anchor, the one person who has made me believe in the kind of love that doesn't flinch when things get hard. We planned this wedding for over a year, pouring ourselves into every detail from the handwritten vows to the vintage flatware, making sure it reflected both who we were and everything we hoped to build together. It was supposed to be the most beautiful day of our lives, a beginning wrapped in lace and laughter. But in the back of my mind, even as I walked down the aisle with my heart pounding and my hands trembling from a mix of nerves and joy, I couldn't ignore the quiet weight of something else, something darker. I knew my younger sister Laura was planning a surprise. And not the kind you laugh about afterward. Not a flash mob or a funny toast or something captured in a cute Instagram video. No, this was something else entirely. Something calculated. Something meant to hurt. She didn't say it outright, but I knew her. I knew her tells, the way her smile tightened around the edges when I mentioned the wedding, the way she brushed off every dress fitting and bachelorette invite with a new excuse. And still, I held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd let me have this day. But deep down I was already bracing for impact. Because Laura doesn't believe in quiet exits or private resentment. She believes in spectacle. And I had a sinking feeling she was about to turn mine into a stage. A week before the wedding, just as I was finalizing the last-minute details and trying to keep my stress from spilling over into full-blown panic, I received a call from our pastry chef. At first, I thought it was a simple confirmation call, something about finalizing the delivery time or double-checking the design of the cake Jason and I had spent hours choosing. But her tone was hesitant, almost confused, and that's when she told me something that made my stomach drop. She said that Laura had contacted her directly and requested a second cake to be delivered on the day of the wedding. Not a backup or a tiered variation, an entirely different cake with its own message written across the top in frosting. "Congratulations on the unborn baby." That was the inscription. Bright, cheerful, unmistakably personal. I remember standing in my kitchen, holding the phone in one hand and staring at the fridge like it might offer an explanation, while my heart started pounding in my chest. The pastry chef continued, clearly uneasy, and explained that Laura had claimed I had asked for the second cake myself but hadn't had the time to follow up, so she was just stepping in to help. She even tried to mimic my tone, apparently to make it sound more convincing. But something about the request had felt off to the chef. Maybe it was the secrecy, maybe the strange timing, so she called to confirm before moving forward. I didn't even know what to say. I wasn't pregnant. I hadn't ordered another cake. And more importantly, I had never asked Laura to handle anything related to our vendors. The realization hit me slowly and then all at once. This wasn't just a prank or a misunderstanding. Laura was trying to plant a lie right in the middle of our wedding day, something that would blindside Jason, confuse our families, and turn one of the most carefully planned moments of my life into a circus. I almost threw up right there in the kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, my hand shaking as the weight of it all crashed down on me. Laura didn't just want to cause a scene. She wanted to hijack my wedding day to announce her pregnancy. Not mine. Hers. That cake, that inscription, that smug little plan, it was never about celebrating me or Jason or the life we were starting together. It was about her. Always her. It was the most obvious, shameless attempt to steal the spotlight in the middle of a moment that was never hers to begin with. And the worst part was, it wasn't even surprising. Laura had always found a way to twist every major event into something that circled back to her. My college graduation? She announced she was moving to Europe. My engagement party? She showed up late and loudly cried about a breakup that, conveniently, no one had ever heard about. Every birthday, every family gathering, every celebration that wasn't centered around her came with the looming threat of some dramatic detour. But this, my wedding day, this was different. This was sacred. And this time I decided enough was enough. I ended the call with the pastry chef as calmly as I could, thanked her for trusting her instincts, and told her under no circumstances should that second cake ever leave her shop. Then I stood there for a long time, my heart thudding in my chest, and made myself a quiet promise. I was done letting Laura pull me into her orbit. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my wedding into another one of her stories. I would do whatever it took to protect this moment, because I had earned it and I wasn't going to let her take it from me. Not this time. I shared everything with Jason that same evening, sitting on the edge of our bed with the phone still clutched in my hand and my thoughts racing too fast to untangle. He listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening as I walked him through the conversation with the pastry chef, the inscription, the lie. For a long moment he didn't say anything, and then he simply asked, "What do you want to do?" And just like that, I knew I wasn't alone in this. He trusted me to lead, to decide, to protect what was meant to be ours. We talked through every option, from confronting Laura directly to uninviting her altogether, but every path felt like it gave her exactly what she wanted: drama, attention, another excuse to play the victim. We decided not to forbid her anything. If she was planning to crash the ceremony with her announcement, we wouldn't block her at the door or give her the satisfaction of a scene. Instead, we would be ready, calm, controlled. And if she wanted to play a game, then I would make sure the board wasn't tilted in her favor. So I reached out to the one person who could unravel everything she was hiding: her ex, Alex. They had broken up a few months earlier in a whirlwind of fights and cryptic social media posts, and though Laura had made it sound like he was the villain of the story, I always suspected there was more to it. I found his number buried in an old group message from a family holiday and sent a simple text: "Hey, I think Laura's about to do something at my wedding and I need to talk to you. It's important." He replied within the hour. And when we finally spoke, what he told me made everything crystal clear. Laura had started dating Alex back in college during her sophomore year, and for a while it looked like something real. They moved in together after graduation, built a life that looked solid from the outside. Shared furniture, vacation plans, whispered talks about rings and future kids. Alex told me over the phone that he had been ready to propose. He had already picked out a ring, talked to our parents, even planned a quiet weekend trip where he was going to get down on one knee. He was completely in love with her. But then, almost overnight, something in Laura changed. She grew distant, irritable, cold. She started coming home later, picking fights about things that had never mattered before. He thought it was stress, maybe burnout, something temporary. But then she started locking her phone, smiling at texts she wouldn't explain, and pulling further away with every passing week. Not long after, she ended it, abruptly and without much explanation, saying it just wasn't working anymore, and that they were too different. Alex was heartbroken, blindsided. He said it wasn't until a few weeks later that he found out she had already started seeing someone else, Eric. Not after the breakup. Before. She had met Eric through mutual friends and, according to Alex, had been talking to him behind his back for months while still sharing a bed with the man who thought he was about to marry her. The moment Eric became a serious option, she jumped ship without a second thought. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategic. As I listened to Alex recount all of this, his voice calm but tired, I realized something with sickening clarity. Laura didn't just lie when it was convenient. She planned. She manipulated. And this wedding stunt? It wasn't out of character. It was who she had always been. Alex and I were never particularly close. Our connection had mostly come through Laura, and after their breakup, there was no reason for us to stay in touch. But I had mutual friends with him, people who had always quietly questioned the way things ended between them, who had hinted that Laura's version of events didn't quite add up. Over the years, I'd heard bits and pieces, nothing solid, just enough to know that whatever wound she had left behind in him had never fully healed. What I hadn't realized until Alex told me himself was that Laura had never actually let go of him. Not entirely. Even after her wedding to Eric, even after the honeymoon photos and the new last name and all the performative posts about her forever love, she continued to correspond with Alex. She'd message him on his birthday, comment on old memories, send late-night texts that skirted the line between nostalgic and suggestive. And Alex, still unsure of what had really happened between them, still clinging to the hope that maybe she regretted leaving, thought it meant something. He believed she still had feelings for him. He told me that she had reached out just a few weeks ago, asking how he was doing, saying she missed their conversations, asking if he ever thought about how things could have gone differently. At the time, he thought she was just being honest. But now, in the context of everything she was planning around my wedding, he saw it differently. And so did I. She hadn't reached out because of love or regret. She was laying the groundwork, keeping him close in case she needed to spin another story, stir another pot, or drag someone else into her drama. It was control, plain and simple. And she was very good at it. I called Alex the next morning, my voice steady but my stomach in knots, and told him everything. No sugarcoating, no second guessing. I told him that Laura was pregnant and that she was planning to announce it at my wedding, not in a quiet, respectful way, but with a dramatic flourish meant to pull every pair of eyes off me and Jason and onto her. I could hear the silence on the other end of the line, that stunned stillness when someone's brain is trying to catch up with a truth they didn't expect to hear. When he finally spoke, his reaction was a mixture of pain and anger, layered so tightly together it was hard to tell which one was louder. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout, but there was a sharpness to it, like something had snapped inside him. He asked me slowly whether I was sure. whether this wasn't some misunderstanding. And when I said yes, that I had confirmation from the bakery and from everything she'd done over the past few weeks, I heard him exhale the kind of breath that comes from being betrayed all over again. Then he said something I didn't expect. He asked how he could help. He told me that if Laura really planned to turn my wedding into her stage, he wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not again. He said he had spent too long letting her play with his emotions, twisting their history into something she could use when it suited her. And if this was the moment she was counting on to rewrite the narrative yet again, he was ready to help stop her. Not for revenge. For clarity. For truth. And maybe, in some way, for closure. The wedding had been going perfectly, almost like something out of a dream I hadn't dared to fully believe could come true. The weather held, the ceremony was beautiful, and every glance from Jason reminded me exactly why I had said yes. Our families smiled, our friends danced, and for the first time in months, everything felt light. I had almost started to let go of the tension I'd been carrying, convincing myself that maybe, just maybe, Laura had decided not to go through with it after all. Then came the moment, the cake. Jason and I stood together in front of the towering creation we had agonized over for weeks, laughing quietly as we held the silver knife together, ready for the traditional first cut. Everyone gathered around, phones out, applause building, that warm and expectant energy radiating from the people we loved. And then, just as we raised the knife, Laura stepped forward. She didn't shout. She didn't rush. She just smiled, stepped into the space beside us as if she belonged there, and with a sing-song lilt in her voice, said, "Wait a second, I have news too." The room shifted. The applause died mid-clap. Heads turned. Jason stiffened beside me, his hand still resting on mine. I didn't look at her. I didn't have to. I already knew what she was about to do. But this time, she wasn't going to finish her sentence. Not the way she thought. Because this time I was ready. She brought her own cake. I hadn't seen it arrive, hadn't noticed who wheeled it in or when, but suddenly it was there beside the real one. Smaller, pink frosting, a cheap imitation of the one Jason and I had chosen. The moment she stepped aside to reveal it, the room gasped in unison. There it was, written in swirling white script across the top. "Congratulations on the unborn baby." I watched the reaction unfold like a scene I had rehearsed in my mind 100 times. My parents began to cry, not out of shock or concern but with joy. They rushed forward, hands over their mouths, already imagining another grandchild, already forgetting what day it was supposed to be. Our guests, friends, cousins, people who didn't know the full story, started clapping, smiling, surrounding Laura as if she had just dropped a bouquet of happiness into the middle of the room. There were hugs and squeals and even someone jokingly asking if she had names picked out yet. And I stood aside smiling. Not bitter. Not shaken. Just calm. Because while she soaked in the attention and played her part to perfection, what she didn't know was that her carefully choreographed moment was about to collapse in front of everyone. I had seen the script before. I just hadn't let her finish it. Not this time. When the noise finally settled and the crowd began to drift back into small clusters, the initial wave of excitement thinning into murmurs and congratulations, I stepped forward, still holding Jason's hand, and turned toward Laura with a steady smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The room was quiet again, curious, expectant, waiting for what I would say. I looked at her, radiant and smug in the spotlight she had stolen, and said, "Thank you, Laura, truly, for your honesty. It's good that you felt safe enough to share something so important with all of us." She blinked, thrown slightly by my calmness, not sure yet if she was being praised or mocked. Then I took a breath and looked toward the door. "But," I continued, "there's still one person missing from this celebration. Someone who should be here. Someone who also deserves to be part of this little announcement." And right on cue, as if the moment had been choreographed by fate itself, Alex stepped into the doorway. His presence was like a crack of thunder in a silent sky. The room turned toward him with a collective shift, curious eyes widening, confused whispers starting to ripple through the crowd. Laura froze. Her face went pale, her hands gripping the sides of her cake table as if she needed to steady herself. And in that instant, I knew she understood exactly what was about to happen. He walked through the room with the kind of quiet confidence that made people instinctively step aside, their curious glances following him as he made his way to the center where Laura stood, stiff and speechless, beside Eric. Alex didn't raise his voice, didn't rush, didn't play to the crowd. He simply approached them, nodded politely, and with a smooth, almost cordial tone, said, "Congratulations on the pregnancy. Really, it's a big step. Wishing you both the best." Laura's mouth parted slightly but no words came out. Then Alex turned his gaze to Eric, locking eyes with him in a way that drained every ounce of color from the man's face, and with a small smile added, "And you know, man, you're cool for letting your wife keep texting her ex. That's some real trust." The silence that followed was electric. You could feel every breath in the room tighten. But Alex didn't stop there. He took one final step forward and, without breaking eye contact, said, "By the way, we were still in touch when you were married. Just thought you should know." Eric's face went stone still. Laura looked like the ground had just opened beneath her. And the guests who had been so quick to cheer her on just moments before, now stood frozen in place, caught in the wreckage of a truth they never saw coming. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket, smothering every whisper and breath as all the energy that had filled the space just moments earlier vanished in an instant. The tension was palpable, thick in the air, every guest suddenly unsure of where to look or what to say. All eyes turned to Laura, whose expression had shifted so quickly it was almost hard to watch. The confident, smug smile she had worn like armor now cracked and crumbling into something pale and desperate, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Eric stood rigid beside her, his jaw clenched, his fists curling at his sides, and after a beat of thick silence, he turned to her and asked, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Is it true?" She didn't answer. She opened her mouth once but no sound came out. Her lips moved, her eyes flicked toward Alex, then me, then the crowd, but there was no explanation that could rescue her from the moment she had walked straight into. Her silence said more than words ever could. Eric didn't wait for her to speak again. Without another word, he turned and walked away from the cake table, his movements sharp and cold. Laura followed a few steps behind, still stunned, her face flushed with humiliation and disbelief, but she didn't try to stop him or look back. They both disappeared through the doorway, their exit abrupt and furious, leaving behind only the echoes of their unraveling and the ruined spectacle that was meant to be her moment of glory. And just like that, the room belonged to us again. After that, it didn't take long before my parents came flying toward me, their faces twisted with disbelief and fury, their voices raised loud enough to draw attention even after the room had already been scorched by everything that had just happened. They didn't ask questions, didn't try to understand. Instead, they shouted that I had destroyed Laura's family, that I had humiliated her in front of everyone she knew, that I was vindictive and cold and cruel for letting it all unfold like that. My mother's voice trembled with emotion as she yelled that this was supposed to be Laura's special moment, and how dare I ruin it. I stood there, still in my wedding dress, still holding Jason's hand, and I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I looked them both in the eyes and replied calmly, "No. It was my day." They blinked, caught off guard by how steady I sounded, how unfazed I seemed after all the chaos Laura had tried to summon. I let the silence hang for just a second before continuing. She wanted to make a show out of it. I just turned on the lights. They didn't have a response. Because the truth, when said plainly, doesn't need to shout. The next day, while the house was still filled with flowers and half-packed boxes of decorations, my parents showed up unannounced, their faces already set in stone before I even opened the door. They didn't ask how I was or if I was happy or how the first night of married life had gone. Instead, they sat down in my living room with the kind of grim finality usually reserved for funerals and delivered an ultimatum that would have shocked me, if I hadn't already stopped expecting fairness from them long ago. They told me that unless I apologized to Laura for humiliating her, unless I agreed to cover the costs of her divorce and pregnancy expenses, because apparently she was too distressed now to work or function or take care of anything herself, they would cut me out of their lives entirely. No more calls, no more holidays, no more pretending we were a family unless I made it right by fixing what I had broken. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I looked at them, my parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, who had turned their backs on me time and time again to coddle the daughter who turned every gathering into a battlefield, and I said, without anger or apology, "Good luck." Then I stood up, walked them to the door and let them leave. Because if that was the price of being in their lives, I finally understood it wasn't worth paying. A few days later, while Jason and I were already unpacking our suitcases on the balcony of a quiet little beach villa we had chosen for our honeymoon, Alex went public. He posted the screenshots. Every message, every flirtation, every late night "I miss you" that Laura had sent while married to Eric, all of it right there for the world, and more importantly for our family, to see. The text stretched back months, and in every one of them, it was Laura who had reached out, Laura who had opened the door, Laura who had kept the thread alive with just enough intimacy to string Alex along while keeping Eric in the dark. There was no twisting it, no explaining it away, no editing the narrative to make her the victim. She hadn't just made a mistake, she had lived a lie, and now it was unraveling for everyone to witness. My phone stayed quiet for a while after that. No more ultimatums. No calls from my parents. No indignant messages trying to guilt me into submission. Because the truth, when laid out plainly and without apology, leaves no room for denial. And as for me, I finally exhaled. Sitting next to Jason, with the ocean stretching out before us and nothing but sunlight on our skin, I felt something I hadn't in months: peace. Real, grounded peace. Because I had chosen the right person, the right partner, the right life. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had the family I needed sitting right next to me, smiling as if the storm had never even touched us. And for the first time in years, I knew, without a doubt, that I was finally fully home.